Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams and we're a day early. And just in case you thought you're all going to be insane, no, I'm busy tomorrow. And so we have a show tonight that will include the usual plethora of news roundup around the world. And then we will have a music break, and the following 2 hours will be a roller coaster. It will be filled with some interesting intel. A few hammers will get thrown, and a bit of drama for the people who like drama thrown into the mix. So pin your ears back, because this show could get rather interesting. Right, the opening reference, All the Hay, I will have a piece, why I played that song and who is it against, in the second hour after the intel. Rather disturbing story, but that's something that people who listen to this show regularly will not have missed. Right. Let's get into the details of the show, and then we'll get into some news that's going on around the world. And the link for the show is www.spreaker.com/user/8955881. You can also listen live on the articles website at thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. You can listen live, you can listen to the archives, and we have a number of must listen to shows. So if you're fairly new to THI and you listen to the must listen shows in order, you'll get an idea of what this show's all about. We have the Facebook page, Truth, Honour and Integrity, and a MeWe Facebook social media alternative at mewe.com, MEWE. And that's also called the Truth, Honour and Integrity. If you can't find it, send an email to truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. And for those in Europe, honour is spelt the American way without the U. And you can send comments or questions or maybe music selections into that email also. Just try to keep them brief. I am a one-man band pretty much, although I do get help with the pages, with the admins, but emails, the shows and everything else comes down to me. And we have the People's Club, the foundation, and you can go and have a look at that at thepeoplesclub.org. Right, no announcements this week. Except to say that we are THI and we're not a non. And we'll get evidence of that later on. Let's get into some news around the world and some opinions on it. Right. This kind of supports what this show has been saying, and also myself when I was over at Cosmic Voice. And it's a worrying trend, and it's funny that it's now appeared in the news after it's been highlighted. You'll find that there's a number of those, like Nexium that we highlighted last year, now being spread all over the mainstream media, and maybe things are changing. We'll see. So the economists Arthur Laffer and Stephen Moore have done detailed analysis and are predicting a new mass exodus of wealth out of New York and California. And they're citing because of the new tax law, which is utter rubbish, but there you go. They'll always find something else to blame. Maybe it was Russia again. But the academics who have studied taxes and migration call the forecast pure nonsense, and in an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal headlined "So Long California and Sayonara New York," Laffer and Moore, who both advised Donald Trump, say the new tax bill will cause a net 800,000 people to move out of California and New York over the next 3 years. Now, the tax changes limit the deduction of state and local taxes to just $10,000, but with so many high-earning taxpayers in high-tax states will actually face a tax increase under the new tax code. And they say that the effective income tax rate, which what people actually pay for high earners in California, will jump from 8.5% to 13%. I would make that bigger, personally. Wealthy people from Manhattan would face a similar increase, they say, and those who make 10 million or more will see a potential tax hike of 50% or more. Exactly. Why would you need 10 million a year? Those hikes, they say, will cause an exodus of residents to move to lower or no income tax states. I think Florida's overburdened already. And in years to come, millions of people, thousands of businesses, and tens of billions of dollars of net income will flee high-tax blue states for low-tax red states. There's that labeling again, blue and red states and blue and red pills. Really. They reaffirmed their estimate of 800,000 people will move from California and New York over the next 3 years. Connecticut, New Jersey and Minnesota will also lose a combined 500,000 people over the same period, they are stating. Now this broke out, and it's interesting at this time, but this is about two top conservative politicians in the UK, and one of the newspapers outed it, that they attended a secret conservative forum held on a luxury island in America's deep south, and Michael Gove and Sajid Javid revealed that they had attended the clandestine conference on the latest register of MPs' interests. The 3-day trip to the conference held by the American Enterprise Institute cost the Conservative MPs £2,000, which is around $2,700 each. No doubt that's passed on to the British people. One of the main conference events was an interactive session on sci-fi weapons that actually exist today. Interesting stuff. New technology coming out. The AEI is one of the biggest right-wing think tanks in the US and is considered a secret neo-conservative event, as the normally publicity-seeking institute issues no press releases about their conferences. And it's kept so hush-hush that even in 2015, Bloomberg News complained that no one would even confirm whether or not it even snowed in the region, so to not give away the details of where this is being held. Anyway, Gove and Javid were the only UK politicians at the event, and they actually spoke at the conference. But under UK transparency laws, MPs have to register attendance in the register of MPs' interests, though they do not have to disclose the nature or content of conferences. Although the full agenda and list of participants for the event was leaked and published in a report, those who attended the conference were roughly 250 multi-millionaire political donors, so all the elites. A $25,000 donation to the AEI buys you a ticket to the 3-day conference, and held at the private coastal Georgia resort island, so you all know what that is by now, surrounded by 5 miles of private pristine beach. Gove spoke on one conference panel entitled "The New Empire Builders: China, Iran and Russia." Oh, the fearmongers. They just love their fear, don't they? The boogeyman's coming to get them. And he appeared alongside Gary Schmidt, who helped establish the project for the new American century. Those of you with long memories will remember the Rumsfeld and Cheney being involved in that particular pamphlet of Death and Doom. And that's a neocon group that successfully advocated for the war in Iraq prior to 2003. Oh dear, I'm so sad to report this. As part of its latest disastrous earnings, which saw trading revenues tumble by 17% as the new CEO, Christian Sewing, took over, it is reported that Deutsche Bank announced sweeping restructuring plans. Isn't it such a shame? Trading revenues tumbled 17%. I wonder what happens when it tumbles the other 83. Anyway, douchebag bank, aka Nazi bank, still is the Nazi bank, has abandoned its long-running ambitions to be a top global securities firm. Go figure. Scaling back US rate sales and trading and reducing the corporate finance business in the US and also Asia. In other words, they're being thrown out. And reviewing its global equities business with a view towards cutting it back. The bank said in a statement, the measures will lead to a significant reduction in the 97,000 person workforce this year, and we translated it more simply as massive layoffs. Predictably, the German bank wasted no time, and according to Reuters and Bloomberg, the purge began overnight when Deutsche Bank fired 300 US-based investment bankers on Wednesday. Another 100 pink slips were expected over the next 24 hours, and in total, the biggest German bank plans to cut more than 1,000 jobs, or over 10%, of the total US jobs in its initial restructuring, quote unquote, and that's my emphasis, not theirs, phase. The US hosts about 10,300 employees of the Nazi bank, or about a tenth of the firm's global workforce. In his earnings call comments, CEO Sewing, maybe that name might be apt going forward, stopped short of disclosing how many of the 97,103 jobs would be let go, while CFO James von Moltke also gave few clues as to how much of its massive 1.4 trillion euro balance sheet would shed in the process. That's $1.7 trillion. This goes back to November. No, actually it was December. The show on or around the winter solstice, where we announced on the show that the mirrored screens had gone down from the banking system. And what was revealed when they all came down is the banks who thought they were billions in the black then found out the real truth, that all of them were massively in the red. And this is further example of it. Von Moltke estimated restructuring costs for 2018 would rise to 800 million euros, up from an earlier estimate of 500 million euros. Bye-bye, Nazis. Canadian members of Parliament have voted, Kevin Annett will be pleased at this, to ask the Catholic Church to apologise for its involvement in the abuse of indigenous students at schools. The residential schools took children from their families to assimilate them into mainstream Canadian society and to hand them over to Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, no doubt. Oops. Apologies of some sort have been issued by Anglican, Presbyterian and United Church, as well as by the Canadian government, and yet they still block things. And in March, the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops said Pope Francis would not issue an apology, and on Tuesday members of the Canadian Parliament voted 269 to 10 in favour of asking the Pope again for an apology for the Church's role in running the government-sponsored schools. The Pope was first called on to apologise in 2015 when a Truth and Reconciliation Commission published 94 calls to action to help survivors heal. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau brought the issue up with the Pope personally last May and during his particular visit to Italy and the Vatican. Trudeau said, "I told him how important it is for Canadians to move forward on real reconciliation with the indigenous peoples, and I highlighted how we could help by issuing an apology." Perhaps Mr. Trudeau needs to look into the mirror and see whether he can actually help, like stop the police interfering and the churches interfering and the social services interfering and blocking the people coming forward with the information. So it's alright passing over and passing the blame to somebody else to apologise, but you're the President, Mr. Trudeau. The people don't want apologies. It's too late for that. They want actions to correct it, as in yesterday. Here's a story out of India. That's a sign of the people themselves changing, and how divisions, largely to do with religion, more times than not, involves that particular label. And India's no different, with Muslims and Sikhs and all Hindus and all kinds of other stuff that goes on there. And they've often clashed, and recent years has been marred by heavy violence between the different religious cults. But this is quite a remarkable gesture, has been offered up and helped foster a rare harmony in one village in India. This particular guy was a mason, not a Freemason, but just a builder mason. Nazim Raja Khan had toiled over the construction of a Shiva temple in a Punjab village, and a thought nagged at him. There he was, a Muslim, building a Hindu temple, and yet there was no mosque nearby where he could worship. And he said, we had no places where we could offer namaz, which means prayers, and it wasn't nice for our relatives when they visited. It kind of rankled, so he raised it with the 400-strong Muslim community in his village of Moom, which is in rural North India. But they were too poor to afford the land. Most Muslims in the area do unskilled jobs, such as casual construction work, while the community's 400 or so Hindus and some 4,000 Sikhs are relatively well off. But fast forward 18 months, and the guy who was working on the opposing religion temple, with the temple nearing completion, and Raja took an unprecedented step, and he approached the temple administrators and told them, you Hindus will soon have your new temple, and you already have an older one, but we Muslims have no place to worship, nor money to buy the land. would you give us a small area of your land? Well, a week later, the Muslim people came back, and the temple management had decided to hand over a nearly 900 square foot of vacant land next to the Muslim temple. You see, that's what happens. That guy, just one guy taking on a control system, because religion is, and an opposing one as well. And people often think, we can't do this, or I can't do this. Well, if you never ask, that guy, kudos to him, asked. I bet the rest of his village thought he was a bit, a few sandwiches short of a picnic. But he achieved, didn't he? And kudos to the Muslim people of that village for reaching out a hand. Now what we need to do is roll that out right across the world. A worrying issue going on in the UK, and this is not unexpected, not for me anyway. This is a fallout to a previous article we did about the government services being bankrupt, Carillion. And as per usual, they'll shut that information down, and then they'll start to point fingers at others. We've already had one story like that. Of course, Britain's also got the let's blame Russia bug, but now they're blaming immigration. Lo and behold, Britain's been flooded with immigrants, which is not a wrong thing per se, but it is if it has an agenda that's not beneficial for all the people concerned. They're citing that there's new immigration rules are hampering the ability of the NHS, which is the National Health Service, to recruit doctors, and health leaders are warning the number of skilled non-EU workers granted UK visas is capped, with the Home Office arguing the restriction is in the national interest. But NHS bosses are complaining and saying increasing number of doctors are being refused permission, and worsening rota gaps and the waits patients face for treatment has escalated. Any excuse. And this comes amid a row after visas for 100 Indian doctors were refused, and the doctors have been recruited as part of a long-running scheme in the northwest of England, which supplies junior doctors to more than 30 NHS trusts. Now, the bosses at the trust have written to the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt and Home Secretary Amber Rudd, asking them to urgently look into the problem. As it stands, the NHS in England has nearly 100,000 jobs unfilled, a situation described as dangerously understaffed. I would say it's dangerously underpaid. If you weren't paying shareholders of the NHS exorbitant amounts of money and gave money to the people who actually work, not sit there pushing pens in faraway islands, who actually do the work, then those 100,000 jobs will be filled overnight. And this total represents 1 in 12 of all the posts in the health service, and would be enough to staff 10 large hospitals. So what they do is they bring cheap labour in from India and other regions, Singapore, another one, outside of the EU, with lower benefits and jobs with non-union, and that's the way they get by. Well, that's gone, and it has to go back to being the real NHS, which is not a private company, It includes 35,000 nurses posts and nearly 10,000 doctor vacancies. The figures have been revealed in a financial report showing the NS services are heading for a $931 million, no, not $million, £1 million deficit. So that's about 1150 million deficit this year, which is twice what was planned. The overspend by hospitals, mental health trusts and ambulance services have been partly blamed on the need to cover the vacancies with overtime and temporary staff. It's going to go, Britain, unless you speak up. See, in the UK, Americans kind of go, oh, you get your health for free. Except it's not. 12% comes out of your wages for that. Unfortunately, the bulk of that 12% is going to pay shareholders. It used to go direct into the system. Yet again, chewing at both ends like the Aurora Boreas. And eventually you find out the head's in the middle and there's nothing left. And that's basically what they're doing in the UK. And they have waiting times for operations of 12, 24 or even 30 months. So in essence then you're forced into going private. So you've then paid twice. And slowly but surely they're pushing people into going private. But the problem is there's no overlap. Well, where an option where a person says, okay, I'll have private insurance, but I'm not paying 12% national insurance as well. Otherwise, that's paying twice. But you try getting them to see that sort of common sense, because politicians don't have much. Where are we next? As one storm dies down in Korea, kudos for the people involved in that. We did forecast it in this show that North and South Korea would reunite and likely reunificate their country. There was never a real issue of nuclear weapons being fired from there. That was another one of the fear porn ruses. But as one dies down, another one arises in the Middle East. Is that a coincidence? Nope. And a month ago, Donald Trump told the cheering crowd in Ohio that US troops will be pulled out of Syria very soon to let others take care of it. And we all said, hear, hear. And according to a report from an Israeli news site, citing a diplomatic source, the head of the US Military Central Command, General Joseph Votel, no, I won't say, arrived in Israel to reassure the head of the National Security Council, the IDF Chief of Staff and other senior defense officials that America has no immediate plans to leave Syria. We'll see about that. And he went on and says, we will continue to support Tel Aviv's means of maintaining security and stability on its border. Immediately after Mr. Trump announced that the United States will be withdrawing from Syria very soon, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had reportedly held a tough phone conversation with the US President, and he reportedly voiced his concerns that if US troops leave Syria, it would enable Israel's enemies, Iran, and its affiliates to gain a foothold in the area. Now, according to a White House statement, the two heads of state discussed recent developments in the Middle East, and Trump reiterated the commitment of the United States to Israel's security, and the two leaders agreed to continue their close coordination in countering Iran's malign influence and destabilizing activities. I would suggest it's not Iran. Take the countries out of it when it becomes Middle East. I'll have more on that later. But the US President's comments came at odds with previous remarks made by high-ranking officials at the Pentagon and the State Department, go figure, saying that US armed forces will preserve an open-end presence in Syria. I wouldn't count on it. And therein lies the problem that Mr. Trump and Americans face. Warhawk goons at the top end who are still playing the old control and paradigm games. And I think it's way beyond time to remove all those who are only interested in more collection of resources, wanting regime changes and kowtowing to Armageddon fulfilling psychopaths. And look after the American people. That's what you're paid to do. Not goose-stepping across the world for other interests. You know, we've spent vast sums of our money protecting a Zionist system. It's nothing to do with the country Israel or to do with its people, and everything to do with a British enclave, which is exactly what Israel is. And enough is enough, in my opinion. Like I said, I'll have more on that later. Citizens Commission on Human Rights issued its support of a disability rights group, ADAPT, in its demand. You think certain bad exposures have come and gone, but here's more, sorry. But it has to be exposed. And they've joined together, Citizens Commission on Human Rights and also the Disabilities Rights Group, ADAPT. And what they're demanding is for a ban on electric shock device used as punishment and control on individuals with intellectual disabilities. Now, CCHR, a 49-year mental health watchdog, said the Food and Drug Administration has been procrastinating since 2014 about a ban on a shock device called a graduated electronic decelerator, GED. Now, this particular gadget delivers multiple shocks to the skin with voltages ranging from 150 to 200 volts and lasting as long as 12 seconds. The United Nations Special Reporter on Torture, Juan E. Menendez, condemned the procedure as pure, unadulterated torture. The Civil Rights Liberties Union said it's inhumane, and Fox aired footage of an 18-year-old Andre Collins being electroshocked 31 times, leaving him in a catatonic state and a stress-induced coma. Collins's mother said she never agreed for her son to be tortured, terrorized and abused. Unlike the electroconvulsive therapy, devices that uses up to 460 volts of electricity to the brain in the treatment of depression. Really? Let's zap people and cure them from depression. Well, we might forget about depression because they're in that much pain. This is Nazi tactics again. And the GED uses painful skin shocks to force compliant behaviour in autistic or seriously emotionally disturbed individuals. Said that the FDA needs to step in and ban both procedures. American psychiatrists, or should I say American psychopaths, are electroshocking the brains of children aged 5 and younger with the ECT version, while behavioural psychologists brutally shock body parts of children to force them into compliant behaviour. and the UN has stepped in and condemned both skin shock and enforced ECT as torture devices. The victims of the skin shock scream in terror while subjected to it, and there is no scientific evidence to support either the procedure as safe or effective. Unbelievable. What are we doing for time? We're okay. I found a diagram, and I thought I would highlight some of the sycophants and psychopaths who have contributed heavily to the Hitlery campaign and the criminal foundation. I think it's time we made these people's lives uncomfortable via their Twitter, blogs and movies also. But here's the main ones. $13.5 million by Haim, who's an Israeli-American media person, and his wife Cheryl Saban, who's a senior advisor for the USA to the United Nations. Go figure. Number 2, 3.1 million, Thomas Alba, who's another film producer, and Albert Tull, Thomas Tull, and Albert Tull, she is in photography and also a film producer. Number 3, J.J. Abrams, another film producer. He sent 1.4 million, and Katie McGrath, who I presume is his partner, is involved in the LGBTQ group. She sent 1.4 million. 2.3 million from Steven Spielberg, another film producer, and Kate Capshaw. 2.6 million, Jeffrey and Madeline Katzenberg, both film producers again. He's getting a pattern, yeah? Should do. 1.1 million, Seth MacFarlane, an actor. Casey and Laura Wasserman. I tried to find links, whether that's linked to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. There probably is. Casey's involved in as an entertainment executive, and Laura is in film music. Then we have 816,000, Barry Diller, who works for Fox Media, and 427,000, Diane von Furstenberg, who was a former princess in Belgium and is now a fashion designer. $628,000, James Cameron, film, and his wife, who's a former actress, Susie Amos. And lastly, $34,000, Magic Johnson and his wife, Cookie. Those are people who need to be reminded that Anne is a complete and utter psychopath. And if you're going to keep sending money to people involved in child trafficking and sexual abuse and other crimes, then all those people I've just named are complicit in it. Time to bombard their Twitters. Australian Cardinal George Pell, the most senior Vatican official, has been charged in relation to the Catholic Church sex abuse crisis, and he must stand trial on charges alleging he sexually abused multiple victims decades ago, and this was ruled by a magistrate in Australia on Tuesday. Magistrate Belinda Wallington dismissed around half the charges that had been heard in the 4-week preliminary hearing in Melbourne, but decided that the prosecution's case was strong enough for the remainder to warrant a trial by jury. The number of actual charges has not been made public yet, and when she asked Pell how he pleaded, the Cardinal said, "Not guilty." Go figure. and Wallington gave him permission to not stand, which is customary, and when the magistrates left the room at the end of the hearing, and many people in the packed public gallery broke into applause at the decision. The lawyers for Australia's highest ranking Catholic had argued all the accusations were untrue, could not be proven, and should all be dismissed. Mr. Pell, who is Pope Francis's former finance minister, was charged last June with sexually abusing multiple people in his Australian home state of Victoria, and the details of the allegations against the 76-year-old has yet to be released to the public, although the police have described the charges as historical sexual assault offences. They're not getting away with it like they used to. There was a question the other week that I kind of overlooked, and I've highlighted many times about the 500,000, 500,000 American children go missing permanently in the USA every single year. And people were questioning where those figures came from. What I can tell you is that's the bottom end figure. The top end could be 900,000. Now, according to the FBI and the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, their records are stating a child goes missing every 40 seconds in America, which then comes to 765,000 children a year. That practice is going to collapse and stop. I mentioned last week about issues and some solutions to the housing market, and in particular the issues of grown-up children not being able to buy homes. And whilst this item is not totally ideal, it's kind of funny how solutions put into the ether, then suddenly something appears. Maybe manifest abilities have gone up. But it's been quite a while since America made a wholesale push to get more cash and income-strapped households into the ever more unaffordable American dream of owning a house. Yes, it's in a dream, and when you wake up you don't have any, courtesy of Deutsche Bank and others. And it's 3 years, which is now nationalised housing agency Freddie Mac has rolled out a conventional mortgage that only requires a 3% down payment for certain borrowers. The problem is that what modest limitations the mortgage program had meant that most Americans who needed access to it would be excluded. And the program, which was described at the time, was designed for qualified, that being the key word, low and moderate income borrowers, i.e. millennials. And it saw limited progress over the last few years, with the FHFA Director Mel Watt telling Congress last year that Freddie's 3% down program, along with a similar one from Fannie Mae, was now continuing to grow. It just wasn't growing fast enough, because apparently putting down 3% is an increasingly greater challenge now for most Americans. Exactly. That's what happens when you only give them minimum pay. So they decided on a change. Freddie Mac announced on Friday it was about to supercharge its 3% down program and launch a widespread expansion of the offering, and announced it's rolling out a new conventional 3% down payment option for qualified first-time home buyers, with one small difference. There are no geographic restrictions as previously, and more importantly, there are no income restrictions. to start, I suppose. Maybe we'll have other plans for that in a later show. Evidence of people power again in California, which is run by Jerry the Brown Shirt. They pushed forward a bill that tried to ban homeschooling. Oh boy. What? Children that are not indoctrinated in the Nazi ways have followed the orders. Oh my, we can't allow that. And people were reporting when I picked up this news item that the bill AB 2756 had failed in the hearing before the Assembly Education Committee, and State Assemblyman Kevin Carley tweeted AB 2756 was just defeated in the Assembly Education Committee, which is a major victory for all homeschool educators, parents and students who came to the Capitol and made their voice heard. Well, I never. People have their voice heard. Maybe time is changing. Here's another change. President Trump signs an executive order on Wednesday to start pulling the federal government out of K-12 education, following through on a campaign promise to retain school control to state and local officials. The order, dubbed the Education Federalism Executive Order, will launch a 300-day review of the Obama-era regulations and guidance for school districts, and directs Education Secretary Betsy DeVos to modify or repeal measures she deems an overreach by the federal government. Stated, for too long the government has imposed its will on state and local governments, and the result has been education that spends more and achieves far, far, far less, Mr. Trump said. Exactly. And he said, my administration has been working to reverse this federal power grab and give power back to families, cities and states, and also give power back to localities. He said that in previous administrations had increasingly forced schools to comply with whims and dictates from Washington, while his administration would break the trend. We know local communities know it best and how to do it best. Mr. Trump, who is joined by several Republican governors for the signing, and the time has come to empower teachers and parents to make the decisions that help their students achieve success without the overreach of federality. Now, this is a good move, but don't expect it to impact it too soon, because there's a 300-day review of it, but at least it's a sign of things moving forward. And it will have a long-term impact on school districts, and hopefully the local people can decide on a better education, real, proper learning study for children, and not the bullshit they're being taught now. Following the review, policy changes will follow in a report on the findings of the review. So that's more positive news. Here's some more. Cambridge Analytica. We covered them recently. The marketing research company, I wouldn't describe them as that, at the heart of the Facebook data breach, is shutting down. Oops. Announced by the company today. SCL Elections, as well as certain of its and Cambridge Analytical LLC's UK affiliates, filed applications to commence insolvency proceedings in the UK. And the company is immediately ceasing all operations, and the boards have applied to appoint insolvency practitioners Crowe Clark Whitehill LLP to act as the independent administrator for Cambridge Analytica. Oh my, yet again, things not going like they plan, and things are changing. Well, that was a lot more positive news, wasn't it? I wonder what we'll have next. Hi all, and welcome back to the second hour. Pin your ear rolls back and popcorn out. Bit of drama, bit of intel, a bit of this and a bit of that. But this, some shows are interesting, some are a bit okay. This one may be different altogether. So, there's been a few issues on the page to do with the Kingdom of Mana people, and here is why. This information I've had since last October. I chose not to out it. It'll become clear why during this piece. And over the weekend, there was an intense period of activity, an intense period of stupidity as well. Hashtag Operation Stupidity. aka the RV, for those unfamiliar with the only this time with a new guy attempting to pull it off. Step forward, Jesper Ellerman, he of Kingdom of Mana fame. Now, Kingdom of Mana was a group that was once part of us going forward with the Mana World Holding Trust. Sadly, late last summer, he chose to go the other way, and Kim and the team removed him last October when the evidence against him mounted up. Now, according to the Kingdom of Mana team, they say the opposite happened and they fired Kim. Except we have bundles of evidence that Kim is still operating, including all the RV people in January. So that obviously, that particular allegation that Kim had been fired has no merit whatsoever. Now, despite all this going on, not one of them from the Kingdom of Mana team bothered to inform me of the news for 4 months. That allegedly Kim had been fired, etc., etc., which is odd behaviour in itself. Or for the fact that for 18 months, and despite promoting him, being Jesper, and the Kingdom of Mana, probably we were the only show promoting him or the Kingdom of Mana, he, Jesper, never bothered to speak to me once in the 18 months. Again, I found that rather telling. And so despite stating they fired Kim last year, perhaps they need to explain to everybody why the world watched as Kim entered working codes for the first time and jaws dropped in January. How can she do that if she was fired? So, to accomplish their goals of carrying out the RV, yet again, they hacked all through the night at the quantum system, housing the trust funds, the new quantum system. You see, they don't have any funds of their own, and resort to what they've always done best, which is thievery. Now, the point remains, at which point do people who follow this type of behaviour see it for what it is? It's a continuation of the old paradigm. And if you are involved in promoting or wanting RVs to go ahead, you are complicit in continuing the slavery program, period. The RV was never for and by the people. Forget all the promises, they've delivered on none of them. But it was a bailout for the same rogue elements who have ran this planet for their own ends. So, another failure of the RV. But this unleashed, not unexpectedly, trolls, shills and false believers from Kingdom and Manor onto our page. One of which works in a Steiner school and is friends with Rockefeller. Oh my. And hiding behind the scenes for the last number of months, the entities known from the Tolek shows as Mr. M, whose name is Matthew Schutler, who thinks he's the reincarnation of Jesus' brother. And also Ms. M, who was actually part of the Manor team and was also part of the UPU show, and she is a reincarnation of Mary Magdalene from her accounts. There must be at least 40 running around now. Popular character. So why are they involved? Well, for the very reason she was dropped from the team not long after the UPU show, and that's why we haven't had it back on since. Because her partner, Matthew, is involved with the Chinese elders and subsequently the Rothschilds rogues and is pushing for the RV. I mean, since when has the Rothschilds or Chinese elders, for that matter, ever done anything for the benefit of humanity? And these people are pushing. So if you have any ideas of what benefits that the Rothschilds and Chinese elders have ever done, please send your answers on a postage stamp and mail it to the Truth, Honour and Integrity at gmail.com. But I'd like to know. Like I said, you'll only need a postage stamp. Just write 0 on it. And remember, it was the Chinese elders who were in control of the trust back in the 1500s at the time, who gave the Rothschilds family $20 million in 1520, 500 years ago, to kickstart their little empire. And yet these same people are now thinking that they're all humanitarian. My ass they are. But Jesper, and we have the evidence, is working directly on behalf of the Rothschilds, and so is knowingly or not, along with his team, Kingdom of Manor, including Zuzander and Hayden Ellis, who have appeared on An Evening with Thomas shows, who sadly have gone along with the man who has more titles than Pete Sampras. I do hope the latter two people start seeing through the illusion Mr. Ellerman is. I do think highly of both of them. Jesper Ellerman changed his name to King Julius. Really. All very Roman Empire, that Jesper. But then he decided that wasn't enough and went one step further and changed his name to two angels, Archon or otherwise, Michael and Uriel. I mean, what type of nonsense is that? And what is that actually doing for the benefit of the people? More hierarchy is not what we need on this planet. kings and grandmasters and angel this and all that other bullshittery. It's all old paradigm. Surely that in itself should have raised concerns within his own ranks. It did for me. Perhaps the members of Jesper's team can go and do some of their own digging, like contact the Papua New Guinea government and officials and find out what they think of Jesper and his plans for Manus Island. Let's just say it won't be complimentary or provide any validity to what he has planned. There are no contracts, no signatures, nothing. Don't believe me? Fine. But go ahead and check for yourself. So Jesper is now the head of the RV program. After promising his team, the Rothschilds and the RV crew, he had the codes to the trust. Except as proven over the weekend and into Monday, he didn't. You see, the issue with the codes is anyone can say they have the codes. Actually, I have the codes for the trust. Doesn't mean to say I can use them. So when the codes didn't work, they resorted to hacking again, which subsequently failed again, only this time it had consequences. The quantum system fired back at the hackers and fried all their servers. Oops. Of course, this left a number of people in awkward and angry mode. Then, like magic, they appeared the following day and cued the people from down under, bombing our page and trying to discredit the trustee. After no doubt Jesper telling them a bullshit story that it was Kim who prevented their promised funding programs. Utter delusional. I won't name them, but you know who you are. A message to them. Ask Jesper where his codes are again. As like the Chinese elders, the Roths, the Pindars before him, they may have had codes, but they don't have any working codes, as proven this week. I've sat on this information for a while and chosen not to out it, as it's non-productive, and also out of the respect I have for Zuzander and Hayden Ellis. But unfortunately, there are people within our group more intent on finding drama and division, digging here and chatting there, than providing solutions to go forward. And in the end, it had to come out. Is it productive? Not really. Has it changed anything? Only the people on both sides. It's up to them to go and find out what Jesper's up to. Is he telling the truth? Are the titles valid? What's going on with the Papua New Guinea government? Let's see the signatures. Now the key for me is this. Kim came to me in February of 2016 offering to help. And she provided a plethora of information, some of which very few people have ever seen. Was I sceptical at first? Absolutely. You have to be. You've seen too much of it before. But I made it clear from the off I would not be sidetracked by promises of this and that, whether it's collectively or personally. My only interest is steered towards the benefit of all and saving this planet. Period. And so on we continued. There were a few times when the foundation was actually on the brink of being launched and was blocked, which did raise doubts of those around me, and I got that. Is this another one of the Nasaras, the GCRs, or heaven forbid another RV program that comes in a blaze of noise and then fizzles out after a plethora of 2-week notices? But I asked the right questions and, more importantly, received the answers back that were based in facts, and I was not fobbed off. Over time, the foundation to me, personally, is not the be-all and end-all. The initial contact and offer to fund it became. Why? Because we both have a desire to clean up this planet and get rid of the total vermin that slithers amongst us. So the initial contact between Kim and I has now taken on a new course of cooperation on a number of points, and a trust has been built up on both sides, which, trust me, pardon the pun, or the double pun, in this game it's not an easy thing to do or accept. We have had people within her original team jump ship to the Rothschilds. Jesper's just the latest, because they fell to the instant short-term gain trick of seducement. Far too many fall for that same trick over and over and over again. All the cabal have fallen for that same trick. All of them. They've all been promised fame, wealth, titles, king this, pindar that, only to find out that so did everybody else. But if we keep falling for short-term gain and long-term failure by taking up offers of seducements, then we're always going to be stuck in the slavery mode. This is a long-term turnaround. It will not be solved totally by money. In fact, in essence, money is the problem, whether you have it or you don't. But the key is to get people operating in a better way, in a better environment, in a living way, not existing way. So that's where me and Kim stand. As regards Jesper and the Kingdom of Mana, I was a bit sceptical of him at first after looking into his background. You see, I do my own checking. And I did ask certain questions about him and was given, at the time, satisfactory answers in return. So on it rolled and things were going to plan. But I began privately to be rather curious as to why I'd had no contact with Jesper, and I thought it odd at the time, given, as I said, we were the only outlet really supporting the Kingdom of Mana and Jesper. No other sites. And then I was introduced to two of his people who I both think highly of and still do. And they told me of an arranged meeting of all the team and a 3-hour Q&A session with Jesper personally, which again I thought was odd that I wasn't included in it, and neither was Kim. But anyway, Zoo said he had recorded it and he would send the recording over, only to then change his mind after consultation, presumably with Jesper. Again, to me, being in Zoo's shoes, that should have raised concerns. Which I then asked Zoo why that would be the case, as I thought it was a team effort, and yet somehow I'm being left out. So what is going on? So it was then suggested that they will be doing documentaries, and I would be included in it, and Jesper will arrange to come on and do a show with you in February. Neither materialised, and I wasn't expecting them to be honest. You see, intuition is a funny thing. It helps us so much, and yet few of us take that offer as support. The intuition at the beginning was right all along. So the key to all this, and it can be settled very easily for all those involved, and that can spare all the hassle and save people on either side of the fence from falling out and making allegations and assumptions. So here's the challenge. Monday, May the 4th, be with you. Jesper and Kim, with observers on both sides, can sit at the terminals and use their codes for all to see. Then we'll really find out who is who and who is not. So to the Kingdom Manor and Jesper team, let's get it on. Let's sort it out once and for all. This Monday, May the 4th, then we can end this nonsense and go forward with clarity and solutions, and not in the current mode of diversions and distractions. I'm hoping I have nothing further to say about the Kingdom of Manor or Mr. Ellerman. They're not productive as it stands. We don't expect them to change. What I'm hoping by revealing this stuff tonight is the people that I do care about that's in his team starts taking a deeper look. Because there's an awful lot of stuff, we can all say he said, she said, and all that. But the proof has already been shown. Jesper failed at the weekend. I've no doubt he'll blame Kim and blame everybody else. Maybe he'll blame the Russians as well. But the point is, he's lying. He hasn't got the codes. And despite what he also said, he could also quite easily hack into the system. That didn't work too well either. Right, that's Kingdom of Manor. You ready? Files, pictures, evidence and documents of major criminality involving financial fraud and other crimes of top people was sent to all American, United Kingdom and Russia media outlets for them to cover as of yesterday. As yet, none have replied. Well, if they are listening, and I imagine many will be listening into this particular show, but once it gets out in its full details, it's going to send ripples. The fact that you all now have the real news and the evidence supporting it, as such, hands over the responsibility of it onto your shoulders. Should you all collectively fail to deliver that information to the public, you are then liable and party to the same criminal actions and subsequent consequences. So let's make it clear. If Mr. X has committed treason and you're sitting on that information and have the proof as such and choose to ignore it, you are also complicit in treason as well. End of warning. Last night, listen closely, between 12:01 and 12:46 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the whole financial system of their control was shut down. This then allowed Kim and the team full access to what had been going on, and then finally evidence of criminality within the system and also who perpetrated it. Various names, familiar and not, had their accounts frozen, and criminal funds seized and removed to other accounts in ready for returning to the rightful owners of the said funds. Whilst that was ongoing, the system was completely overhauled and cleared of any backdoors, rogue software, all flags in the system on persons or groups. This plays into the targeted individuals theme. Anyway, all of them were removed from the system, and rogue data storage was also removed from the system as well. The trust account, which was off ledger due to being blocked, was then transferred and installed into the system as on ledger and subsequently live. Whilst ongoing, the Five Eyes system spy, known as Echelon, was completely frozen. Oops. The next part of the operation involved no flagging of any person or group connected with the accounts that will be deposited from the trust into the project funds accounts. This will prevent what has previously happened, whereby fake FBI agents have been turning up at banks with fake badges issued by rogue agencies to attempt to block or cause issues with the people connected to the accounts. Going forward, now all the flags are removed from the system. An official warrant will be required with two types of ID of the individual acquiring the warrant. That's important to note. The individual requiring the warrant, which then logs them as accountable if the warrant is based on rogue evidence or used for nefarious reasons. Going forward, there will be no fake FBI calling in favours from the Department of Homeland Security anymore to issue fake warrants. So the people who do that, who are working for paymasters, will face the consequences. And you think that's enough? You ain't heard nothing yet. Attempts were made by the clowns and their legions of hackers to break in and steal a few test accounts that were set up and delivered by the trust this week. They tried to rename the accounts and then steal them. They then tried to leverage the accounts to Hong Kong. Go figure, Chinese elders. Now, these actions have been ongoing, as reported frequently in the show, except now they have consequences of actions: direct, immediate, instant, not soon or imminent. As that has now changed, as the system recognises the person attempting to raid the accounts, and what happens next will please everyone bar them. The system accesses their own personal accounts and shuts it down. Oops. Any further intrusions by the puppets of these clowns will face the same consequences. So go ahead and make our day, punks. But know the consequences. It won't be your paymaster losing their accounts, but they will eventually, don't you worry. You will. So please quit that type of stupidity you are involved in and step down, or better still, come and help us instead. We have a real plan for all, not the select few. Now, this same consequences also will now apply to anyone deciding to block our accounts being accessed, will subsequently have their own accounts blocked and unable to access. And they may get seized permanently. Told you we wouldn't mess around. Next intel. We still got a bit way to go yet. The head of NATO, this will enrage Americans, or should do, has been sending 75 to 78% of what is being collected from allied nations and sending it to the Rothschilds. During the raid on the system, while it was shut down, all the funds that were able to be recovered from that exercise have been returned to the respective nations. Criminal files have been sent to all nations involved. Next intel item. Also, during the investigation into the system, the Rothschilds were found to be funneling funds out of the UN also. The UN has a new temporary president, and she doesn't take lightly or kindly to those actions, and has returned the $50 billion membership fees to each country involved in the UN. Under the original Charter of the UN, there was no membership fees for being a participant in it. So basically these fees, 50 billion per country, were just another slush fund for the Rothschilds et al. And they still couldn't pull off their RV. Other evidence of contributions being misused were also refunded to the countries, some of which of the recovered funds of their contributions made to the UN also were returned to the respective countries. Now, a word about the codes for the new system. Like I said earlier, I have the codes, haven't seen the documents. Tank also has the codes for an experiment done in January. But can we use them codes now? No. Many have the codes, but only one validates it. All codes have a time span on them. They also have a date span on them, and also a transaction reason on them. And once those dates, times and transactions have passed, those codes are rendered useless. You see, it's not only them who's clever. So this is where all the RV people all get excited and have been duped. All the gurus and at the behest of the Chinese elders jumping up and down saying they have the codes, along with a plethora of other alternative media personalities saying they have the codes now and it's all going to happen. What they have are useless numbers that only work from direct contact and approval from the trust. So Jesper, who did have codes to the system when he was part of the team until his deception was fully revealed, and his working codes then became null and void back in autumn of last year. Like I said, he boasted he could hack into the system. That didn't work either. Final piece of intel. So, what did this all bring about? Well, now the trust account has gone from off ledger to on ledger. It means the trust funds for the projects and the humanitarian programs can now go ahead. A number of test funds into certain accounts has now been made, and they are readying everything now for full delivery and transfer of the funds, and all being well, we the people will very soon be ready to rock and roll. Hi all and welcome back. Hope you were all thunderstruck with that. We waited a long time for certain things to roll out, and people to face consequences of actions has been the most frustrating thing for myself, Kim, and all the others that are involved. You know, we've often done pieces recently about what is proof and what is truth, but if you keep searching for proof when it's already been given, the point is you don't really want proof, do you? You want to continue with the illusion. And this is a common theme. It's the victim mode. It's many play into. I did myself when I was younger. And it's why it's so important. A lot of the work that we've done at THI is focusing on the psychological side of things. You can throw all kinds of money at everything, but if people are going to act the same way, it's completely pointless. And whilst there will be excitement about the potential of the trust funds being delivered in the very near future, we must also work hard on ourselves and not continue with the fun and games we all play with ourselves, and fight for change. Be the change. And that means working together. Nothing would please me more than to see the lads from the Kingdom of Manor to join up again. We've all made mistakes in life. The person who never made a mistake in life never did anything. So, I had a fairly full show before that came in. We've been kind of working on it. Kim's been working night and day. And who to involve, where to look, given we had that short window with which to do so much. And I think we did rather well. And we must recognise and thank Kim and their team for doing that for us. Yes, the usual male ego kicked in this week, calling her a dictator. What's the problem? Don't like a woman in charge? Oh my, hardly spiritual, that is it. The key is all about joining together, and I have a piece on that later, so I don't want to ramble on too much. But you want to see the levels of desperation now. I was sent this piece, courtesy of Leo Zagami, who states he's a former Illuminati member, which is correct now, given there is no Illuminati no more. It's just factions. Now, Leo sent me a friend request at the weekend, which I thought was rather odd, so I checked his page, and he had an advertisement for the Illuminati, and it reads as follows. The Illuminati is not a secret society. It is an open society that advocates for peace, companionship, and bringing the society together, irrespective of their colour, creed, race, and class. All sounds very good, doesn't it? Members of the Illuminati also receive immortality. Really? So do our souls. Death is the illusion. The Illuminati Brotherhood was founded under the principles of love, peace, justice, and unity and relief. The original might, but the Adam Weishaupt, who is potentially the person on the dollar bill, not Washington, go and check the likeness, changed all that. And it goes on. You've offered immortality, and they say the Illuminati brings together individuals of goodwill irrespective of their differences and ensure these good men become better people in society. And to achieve that, here's what happens to those good men. Immediately after your final initiation, new members are always given a financial benefit equivalent to $200,000, a brand new car, a residence in any country of their choice, and an appointment with 4 top celebrities of their choice. Really? I couldn't pick any. VIP treats in all international airports, and a monthly salary of $1 million to reorganize their lives in order to fit the class and status of the club members who help them achieve all that they ever wanted in life. Other monetary rewards are communicated immediately after the initiation stage. Inbox the Grandmaster for your online initiation. Oh boy, they're getting desperate now, aren't they? This is reminiscent of the adverts that were on British TV. I'm not too sure it made it over to America, where the Catholic Church was advertising for people to come back. No, we've had enough of your sadistic behaviour, and you keep talking about class, and also irrespective of their colour, creed, race, and class. And then you're talking about lavishing gifts on people, creating haves and have-nots. It's contradictory in its highest form. So now there is no Illuminati left to carry on playing games and running around half naked in the Hellfire Caves and also Bohemian Grove. They're offering seducements to join. Except these seducements are in its lowest denomination form. Let's look at their principles. Since when has money brought love, peace, or unity? The two categories left, justice and relief. Justice is not real justice if money and secret societies use it to counteract and overcome real justice, does it? Relief. Yeah, relief. Which brings relief only to the select few. So again, how is that justice? It's certainly not loving, is it? The Illuminati advertising. Oh my. There was a poster put up this week of Anne, her AIDS patient husband, and their hideous offspring Chelsea, wanting people to attend a $100,000 gathering to promote all things Clinton Foundation. Oh my. Are they short of funds also? But which complete half-wit is going to pay $100,000 to sit and fawn over them and their depravity? Are people really that stupid? Like I said, maybe the Clintons are short of money again, and they don't have the Bush family funds to bail them out this time. Oops. Perhaps only a nun's queue included, and all the people should attend outside and cause a bit of a disruption. A peaceful one. I think that's coming up on May 25th. Maybe she might not make that. Where are we next? Kanye West made the news this week as a sidekick of Mr. Trump, which cost him 10 million Twitter followers by all accounts. Now, two things come of this. Is one, since when have people only followed people based on their politics? I find that vacuous in its extreme forms. And the rivalry of political parties in this country I find both disgusting and utter stupidity in equal measure. You know, the day the masses see through that illusion will be the people's real day of freedom. The reality is most politicians are self-serving prats, devoid of compassion, morals and integrity, until they prove to us in real terms otherwise. And I mean real terms. And two, the thin line of being a personality which can be built up into gigantic proportions that is not based on talent or otherwise, but on market employees and scheming, based on a certain branding implement by the likes of Tavistock Institute and also the Council of Foreign Relations. They're the branding company for everything. But one stroke of a pen or one misplaced word in the media or one missed action or deed can take away all your so-called fame in an instant. And lead to an increasingly idiotic public devoid of their own sense of self, turning against you and stripping it all away. Remember, your fame is at their behest, not the other way around. If no one watches your movies or buys your records or follows your Twitter, you have no fame. It's all very shallow and an example to the rest of the so-called stars of our world, how easily your so-called higher status can be removed. And it's time for other people in Kanye's circle of false stardom to step down and step forward. You're all pawns in their game. People have a lot more respect if you're operating on their behalf or our behalf and not the cabal's behalf. Stepping out and stepping forward and joining with us will gain you far more than their bogus awards that keeps you happy in your self-important world. But all they are there for and designed for is to keep you looking important with its wealth, fame and trappings, and regain a chance for you to regain something that's far more valuable in life, like truth, honour and integrity. Of course, Kanye has caused another storm by stating the obvious, which the media have jumped up on and are labelling it all kinds of labels, where he says blacks are mentally imprisoned. I wouldn't just include blacks in that either. But the statement in and of itself is correct. When you consider the majority of blacks voted for Clinton. If they found out the real truth that the Democratic Party had a paramilitary force in its initial setup as a party called the KKK, then why are so many blacks voting for them? So in essence, Kanye West, and quite honest, I have no idea who he is. I don't know what he does. I believe he's married to a Kardashian, which kind of not much of a status symbol. I have no idea what they do either. But his statement that blacks are mentally imprisoned is correct. There's a vast quantity in this country and other European countries that are mentally imprisoned in the partially cabal boxes. Remember the piece we did a few weeks ago about the boxes and how most of the boxes were our own. So you have a party that's directly, not indirectly, but directly affiliated to the KKK, who lynched and tortured and killed so many blacks. And yet the vast majority of the black population are voting for that said party. So all you political correct idiots really need to learn some history. Because once you have, then you will have an inkling of an understanding of what Kanye West stated. Mentally imprisoned. And largely, that's your own doing. But a chance to correct it. Duality. I said I would touch on this earlier. and the problem it creates. Now, it appears from a document I was sent recently, when early man was in Lemuria, which, contrary to popular belief, was not in the Pacific. It was in Russia. And the likely area that was almost completely wiped from the map and history, known as Tartaria. So you want to ask why the frequencies in Russia are different. There's your answer. Resonant frequencies. So Lemuria was not a massive island in the middle of the Pacific, as often mentioned. That is the land of Mu, not Lemuria. Now, the key aspect is those people in Lemuria didn't have two hemispheres of the brain, only one. Now, whether it was a part of a grand experiment or not, time will tell, but I don't think it has helped this version of humanity too much, operating in duality. So much in life is about choosing one over the other. Race, country, colour, sexuality, politics. And then you have the internal battle of left and right brain. Well, you hear people say, I'm left brain, so I have this quality or that quality. And you often hear vice versa for those of right brain thinking. And we all kind of get immersed into it in what is essentially a battle of the self. Why would we want to battle ourselves and instead learn to progress ourselves? And this is the key going forward. The battle of self and of the self is a key component of world freedom. Yes, you can point with valid reasons to the role of the cabal, politicians, bankers, and even ETs as interfering, and yes, they have, but only to a large degree if we allow them to. And therein lies the problem. We've allowed them to run our lives for far too much and far too long. Too easily, in my opinion, given over our own responsibility to others, to those with a heavy penchant of taking advantage of us. And one could argue, well, if they keep giving their energy away and refuse to learn the real truth, why shouldn't we take it? All very Cassandra thinking. I think you would all agree with that. But it shouldn't negate our own responsibility on these matters either. So, what is the solution? Well, it's simple in essence. What I've tried to do with these shows is to get us to think and act different, get centered and be balanced. And that's the gist of it. All solutions are best when they're simple. They've made everything complex for a reason. Though nobody understands it, or very few get it, and the very few that do get it are classed as nuts or conspiracy theorists. So duality is left or right brain. So like an election, you're only offered up those choices. Many just go along with those choices, but there's a third choice, and that comes down to you, not them. So ultimately, we have our own choice, and subsequently our own freedom. Unlike the election, where you have, or many people forgot, you have the option of choosing neither. In this aspect, you choose both. So left and right merge into the centre and become the one. the triality. You could draw a line from your left side of your hemisphere to the right, and then bring it up to a point in the middle. You have a triangle, the triality, and what's the centre top point? The pineal gland. The centre, the balance, the fulcrum of human potential. Let's stop thinking of left and right brain thinking, and let's start thinking one hemisphere. That is your centre. That is your balance. In essence, the left and right brain are what I keep referencing in this show, the metronome again, isn't it? It's swinging from side to side. The ultimate is to stop it in the middle. 45, 55 again. And it's time we use that potential and chose wisely and exercise your own free will and not just absorb what they are offering to you. This is the key to humanity progressing forward as a species. Let's end duality. Oh, where are we going next? I think we're going to run out of time. Or we're going to run over time. This is something to ponder on, but not necessarily hold on tightly to until more definitive proof is garnered and also clarified. Now, courtesy of Kim, her team, and this show, we have outed a whole heap of crimes by known entities around the world, including many current and former leaders. All of them have been exposed and their fulcrum files released and shown all around the world to the relevant authorities. Now, what if all the leaders were called into the White House for a purpose? Think of who has visited recently. Then you can add in Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, and told they are about to be brought down and exposed. But first, you will help us carry out tasks. The tasks designed to clean up the swamp and mercenary-style armies, of which there is many. Perhaps those who are brought in are part of that plan. Perhaps. Perhaps those who refused were subsequently whisked into court and have been charged under the banner of fraud and corruption. Time will tell on that. So, nutty asshole decides to help in Syria and Iran. Could that be for his and Zionist gain? Yes, absolutely. And why I said don't hold on to it too tightly at this point. But maybe he's following a plan. Now, America is perceived to have attacked Syria, and yet Russia never responded. Why is that? Is Putin in on it? Mr. Assad kept quiet and never responded either. Little to no murmurings anywhere, which in itself is rather odd. So we know there was a research facility doing some human experiments and trafficking, and another involved in nuclear research that was bombed, but it was not bombed with warheads. From what I hear, they were duds. Then we hear Iran is next and fears increase. But then we get to hear about a rogue nuclear deal involving Obama and his gang of mercenary armies known as Muslim Brotherhood. Point to make, they are nothing to do with being Muslim and everything to do with causing chaos for financial compensation. Please don't label Muslims. That's exactly what they want you to do. Where large cash funds were delivered directly to the source, yes, you, Obama. Now, since when has a government ever delivered cash? Why wasn't it investigated? And yet again, the American people pay for something that we get no gains from. $250 billion. Iran and Syria, it appears we're not being told the full story of, and just maybe other leaders are helping to drain the swamp before ultimately facing their own consequences of actions. Of course, it could all well be a ruse, and the caliphate program just rolls on. Only time will tell. But it's something I would like people to consider. Now, last week in a piece I highlighted as part of an ongoing problem that ties into the Parkland shooting in Florida. Something to pay attention to. Well, they've got a lot more attention now, not by the media, but the alternative media. Well, I mentioned one cop had died suddenly with no health issues at age 42. Was it a coincidence that the cop was talking out of official line? Not really. Well, what has been revealed this week is 2 other cops in Broward County have died also in their sleep. The other one died of cardiac arrest with no previous health issues. Hazardous profession when real criminals are in the spotlight, it seems, being a cop. Now, there was 2 cops in Florida. I think it was Marion County, I can't remember now. Killed in the line of duty earlier this year or late last year. And every time I turn on the local news, there appears to be some sort of ceremony for those 2 particular fallen cops. At least 4 that I can remember. And yet 3 cops in one county dying in somewhat mysterious circumstances with no previous health issues renders 0 news. Perhaps those cops only died in our world and not on the Portal People world, or so it seems. I played the song at the opening of the show. Hello, my name is Human. To Alder Hey Hospital in Liverpool, which has been the centre of a rather, I wouldn't say tragic, I would say hideous case involving a 2-year-old child, which I'll be covering shortly. But as a background to Alder Hey Hospital, which is the main children's hospital in the city I was born in. This particular hospital has previous stains on their character and their mode of operation also. Back in January of 2001, in fact, I was involved, because I worked for social services, of accessing certain files that were involved with Alder Hey, and certainly certain social workers that were involved. And some of them were absolutely awful. But maybe people think that this organ harvesting is new. This will tell you it's not. And it made news back in January 2001, but it was actually murmuring back in 1996. It didn't make the news till 2001 that Alderhay Hospital were retaining hearts and organs of babies. The organs were stripped out without permission from babies who died at the hospital between 1988 and 1996. I can tell you it was going on long before that. Hospital staff also kept and stored 400 fetuses collected from the hospital around the northwest of England. And here is some of the stuff that was revealed back then. Bristol Hospital, 1998, found out they were keeping babies' hearts after surgery. Alderhay, scandal emerged accidentally when heart specialist Professor Robert Anderson revealed at a separate official inquiry into heart surgery at Bristol that a store of children's hearts was kept at Alderhay Hospital. Birmingham, Diana, Princess of Wales Children's Hospital, and Alderhay, Liverpool, found to be harvesting organs and tissues from babies that died in the hospital in the early 1990s. Hospitals involved in that particular case were found to have given thymus glands that were removed during heart surgery from live children to a pharmaceutical company for research. There's that glands issue again. They then received cash donations from the company involved. Organ harvesting at Alderhay had been such an established practice that even parents whose children had died decades ago found out that organs had been removed before the bodies were released to the families. Even when the hospital told parents that organs were missing from the bodies of their dead children, that some parents were still not given the whole truth. This is why the social workers got involved. In some cases, parents had organs returned to them for burial, only to face the agony of another funeral months later when another organ or piece of tissue was returned. That's Alderhay Hospital. They're not alone in it. But the real issue of Alderhay Hospital and the murder of Alfie Evans. Heart as big as Liverpool in the city. That's going out to the young lad whose life was torn away by the state. And this is not something that we should be ignoring just because it's in a different country. In a week where there are numerous displays of vacuous British public celebrating the life of another royal child, all designed to drain more funds out of the system and away and out of the people, the state, the government and the hospital combined to take the life of a commoner child. Alfie Evans, who was born in May of 2016, who was born a healthy child until he had vaccines, at which he started suffering seizures. He was at first admitted to the hospital the following December after, and had been a patient ever since. The child then underwent large quantities of sedative and also experimental drugs. Also found on him were various mysterious puncture marks and evidence of invasive procedures which the parents had reported. This then led to the parents being stripped as legal guardian. That word is important. stripped as legal guardian rights of the child by a court. Notice it says guardian rights and not parental rights. It's the key to all of this. The court then orders what was essentially the execution of the child via lethal injection using fentanyl. His parents, who live in Bootle in Merseyside, Liverpool, and the couple had heavily criticised medical staff, with Mr. Evans suggesting his son was a prisoner at the hospital and had also been misdiagnosed. They had wanted to fly the toddler to an Italian hospital who offered free treatment, and an emergency medical helicopter to fly him and his family to Italy free of charge was laid on. But the police, the courts and the hospital all blocked it. The sight of a row of cops blocking the entrance of the hospital to stop the parents removing their own child should live long in the memory for every parent and those who witnessed it. Alderhay Hospital said scans showed catastrophic degradation of his brain tissue, and that further treatment was not only futile but also unkind and inhumane. What followed next was the hospital then withheld the child's food, water, oxygen and drugs. Alfie sadly murdered. In Alfie's interests or the state, and here's why. Once that child had turned 2, which is sometime this month, the vaccine injury which kept him on life support would have been claimable, and the British government would have had to pay lifelong care and social support for that child. Is this really why they turned off his life support and denied him food and water, and then detained him by force in the hospital until death? This was murder by the state. Now, this case has been a fairly hot topic of debate in the UK, and shows further examples of how the system of control works against us, and why it is essential that everybody takes an interest in it. And I mean everybody. It cannot be tolerated anymore just because it's not happening to your child. The reality is the system of birth certificates and who controls them means it affects every single child on the planet. Period. But because the vast majority of people are unaware of what happens when you register a child, you're basically signing it over to the control of the state, which is why they said guardian rights, not parental rights. You are only, as a parent, are only responsible when they don't interact, or better worded, don't interfere with your child's life. So where do they interact? Schools, hospitals, doctors. Those sound familiar. It should be. Remember me mentioning recently of the 8 institutions that work against us. Well, there's 3 right there. Schools dictate what they think for your child, not you. Hospitals, doctors and nurses are modern day gods deciding who lives and who doesn't, depending on whether the recipient family has money or are they a targeted family. And if you don't believe in certain families and children being targeted, you have no idea of how far that particular program goes. None whatsoever. We all hear often, well, the doctor knows best. Says who? Is there any proof that they actually know better? You know, this show and many others in the alternative community often get asked for proof. And yet so many in society accept statements like that, the doctor knows best, and just go along with it. Because it's always been that way. The same applies with teachers. Teacher knows best. Really? Based on what? Where is the evidence to support those statements? Because when you look at it and really analyse it, it has no basis of proof or evidence. None whatsoever. And this is why it's important people have to relearn the ability to question everything. Look at your words. Doctors trained for 7 years and not a single minute in 7 years is spent on cures, but they know better. Look at the word doctor or doctoring. Doctoring means to interfere with or falsify evidence. Is that a real definition of the term doctor? In reality, they've all become glorified and systematic pill pushers. So the question for the doctors, did you train for 7 years plus just to become a drug pusher? Because there are some people on the streets who have never trained for 7 seconds, making similar money, pushing different types of drugs. Except by society, one's declared illegal and one's not. Again, says who? There's a pill that cures hepatitis C. It costs a nickel to make. It's sold in India for the ridiculous figure of $900,000. $900, sorry, not 900,000. $900. It costs a nickel to make. Why is it being sold in India for $900? And that because that's scandalous enough. But you know what it costs in America? $84,000. In an age of minimum wages, who can afford that cost? The answer is no one. And yet we trust these people with our lives. But let's start getting real here. We owe that to ourselves and we owe that to our children. Dentists told us for years, fluoride is good for us. Dentists, I'll tell you what these people are, hazmat sellers. Personally, I'd let all dentists drink fluoride straight from the barrel, unfiltered, and then tell us it's good for your teeth. I'm sorry, but fluoride is a genocide, slow poison agenda. So I wouldn't be trusting dentists either. Teachers, oh dear. America is in its third generation now of teaching stupidity, courtesy of the Ford Group and Carnegie. So now we are well into the program of teachers who were taught stupidity themselves, then teaching it onto the next generation, and so on. Now, doctors and teachers per se are not the problem. I want to make that clear. It's the system that created them. But what I do have an issue with is how so few of them cannot see through the obvious bullshittery and point blank refuse to look at the issues that others like ourselves with an outside view can see as clear as day. They fiercely defend their professions and status, but look at the evidence. I don't need to, I am the doctor, or I am the teacher. Yeah, right, and that gives you authority on the truth, does it? In whose world is that? And when did that ruling come into play? The term "they know what is best," whether referring to doctors, nurses, hospitals, teachers, politicians, military, judges, or lawyers, and heaven forbid, social workers, my disdain for them half-wits goes rather deep. Saying how they know best is not based on facts. Facts don't support those statements. It's all based on dissolving your own personal responsibility, pure and simple. And yet so many scream they want freedom. Well, how can you have freedom when you keep handing over responsibility for your own lives and your children to others who know little of how real life should be? The very people who only know and accept the program. That program is and has been destructive for our development of the species, period. Now, this case of the state deciding and telling you they own all of your children until you are 18 should outrage every single person, not just the activist view. You have a child or a grandchild. It's important to you. In essence, the most important issue. Life and progression of a species is all about producing and developing offspring. Our role as humans and parents is to guide them to be better than our generation. It is how species progress. What we have instead is disturbing when done in an overview point of view. So listen closely. We have a system that from birth steals your child's trust fund. It then tricks you into registering them over to the state. It then injects 10 to 30 poisons via vaccines into them before they get to school. School then poisons their minds with endless drivel, spitting out propaganda, distorting truth, and denying the child whose most informative and most important years of development for soul growth is 0 through 7, the chance to go forward. You want to know why so many are They then decide to roll them into the adult world, using terms like, you will not get on in life unless you go to college and or university, and we will show you how to become a proper adult. And how do they do that? By then immersing the child in a lifetime of debt called a student loan. You can't pay off student loans working in McDonald's or some other minimal pay per hour. You can barely live on that, never mind pay loans off with it. Then they go into the real adult world, where they are now stuck with helicopter parents because they can't afford homes or rent homes of their own. They meet a partner and have a child to repeat the cycle all over again, except the state in America has another hammer waiting for you upon delivery. A $20,000 fee for delivering your child. $20,000 to deliver a child in America, for bringing a progression of our species into the world, and no one questions why we're doing that. I mean, Wells de Fargo is that all about? It's utterly ridiculous, and it's something every American should be ashamed of their role in it, myself included. Just how and why did so many buy into that program is beyond stupidity. How and why have we so readily and easily accepted those life choices for our children? How and why are so many still propagating it? It's beyond criminal on their part for setting it up that way. But bad Lord, how stupid have we been in accepting it? The question remains, what are we, and I mean all of we, not just this group, going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? There are many courses of actions we can all do. Is it comfortable? Nope. But we cannot absorb all of the responsibility each and every one listening to this show has absorbed, whilst others go about their lives like all is well. It's clearly not. And some may respond to this piece and say, Thomas, but who can we trust? You've virtually trashed every institution. Good question. The answer is you. Perhaps put a little bit of trust in me as well. But ultimately, it's about you. We cannot allow states to murder under 2-year-old children and get away with it. We cannot allow for all of us to be regarded as guardians of our children and not parents. And only you can fix that.
The Planners.
Hi all, I didn't realise we're generally at the end of the show. Those 3 hours went quick. But I felt given Alfie was from my hometown, I had to write that piece. But I hope people realise what we're allowing to the children, and remember that piece as much as the intel. That has to stop. Hospitals and doctors and teachers and government saying they know better than we do. Where's the proof? There is none. It's this false belief system. And it's time we woke up out of that slumber and created our own ways that we know best, and subsequently support each other. So I do have a number of other pieces, but I've decided I'm going to end the show by repeating the intel, because it was such a positive thing, and after that rather disturbing story of Alfie, I didn't really want it to end on that. So I'm going to repeat the intel and then end the show. So the files, pictures, evidence and documents of major criminality involving financial fraud and other crimes of known people were sent to all major American, UK and Russian media outlets for them to cover. As yet none have replied, and if they hold on to that and do not release it, that makes them complicit in those actions. Last night, between 12:00 and 12:46 a.m, the whole financial system was shut down, and Kim and the team had full access to what was going on, and then found the evidence of criminality within the system and who perpetrated it. Various familiar names and not familiar had their accounts frozen, and criminal funds seized and removed to other accounts in ready for returning to the rightful owners of the funds. Whilst that was ongoing, the system was completely overhauled and cleared of any backdoors, rogue software. All flags in the system were removed, and also rogue data storage was also removed. The trust account, which was off ledger due to being blocked, was then transferred and installed into the system as on ledger and subsequently live. The echelon, known as the part of the Five Eyes system, was completely frozen whilst all this was going on, so there was no fun and games from them. The next part of the operation involved that no flagging, which is making people targeted individuals that get blocked from mortgages, credit cards, bank accounts, you name it, and other things. There will be no flagging of any person or group connected with the accounts that will be deposited from the trust into the project fund accounts. This will prevent fake FBI people turning up at banks and threatening them with fake badges issued by rogue agencies in an attempt to block or cause issues with the people connected to the accounts. Going forward, an official warrant will be required with two types of ID of the individual acquiring the warrant, which then logs them as accountable if the warrant is based on rogue evidence or being used for nefarious reasons. There will be no fake FBI calling in favours from the Department of Homeland Security anymore. Attempts were made by the clowns and their legion of hackers to break in and steal a few test accounts set up and delivered by the trust this week. They tried to rename the accounts and steal them. They then tried to leverage the accounts to Hong Kong, and They've done this over a long period of time and previously had no effects or consequences of actions. That has now changed as the system recognises the person attempting to raid the accounts, and what happens next is the system accesses their own personal accounts and shuts it down. Any further intrusions by the puppets of these clowns will face the same consequences, so go ahead and make our day. But know the consequences. It will be your personal account that gets closed down. You will not be getting it back. The same applies to any deciding to block our accounts being accessed, will subsequently have their own accounts blocked and unable to access also. The head of NATO has been sending 75 to 78% of what is being collected from allied nations, the bulk of which is American money again, and is being forwarded to a Rothschild's account. All funds that were able to be recovered have been returned to the respective nations, and criminal files have been sent to all nations involved. Rothschilds were also found to be funneling funds out of the UN, and the UN has a temporary president in place currently who has returned the $50 billion membership fees to each country involved in the UN, as under the original charter of the UN there was no such thing as membership fees for being a participant. Basically, these fees were just another slush fund for the Rothschilds et al. Also refunded to the countries were some of the recovered funds of their contributions that were made to the UN also. The codes for the new system, many people have them, only one can make them work. They are time stamped, date stamped and transaction reason stamped. Unless you fulfill all of them, they won't work. And the final piece, now the trust account has gone from being off ledger to on ledger. It means the trust funds for the projects and the humanitarian programs can now go ahead after a short period of testing and readying. A number of test funds into certain accounts has now been made, and as I said, they are readying everything now for full delivery and transfer of the funds, and all being well, the people will start to feel the benefits of the trust funds. I'm not going to give dates. I have an idea of the date. I'm not giving dates out because clowns are still doing their best to prevent it. But they have consequences of direct consequences of actions for interfering any further, and we could be in for a rather interesting time. Not only to do with the trust funds, like I said, money doesn't solve everything. It can help things, it doesn't solve everything. We need to really get going as peoples together and fight for a common cause, the progression of the species. That's our only real goal. 6 years ago, 90% of us should have gone under their plans. 6 years on, maybe in the coming months of this year, 90% of them will be gone. The key aspect for us all going forward will be revealed in this last song. I hope you've enjoyed this show. I have no doubt there'll be some tuning in tomorrow, waiting for the show to come on and realise, oops, it was a day early. Apologies for that, but I am busy. And I think most people will have enjoyed this show. The intel's good, but I want people to really take account what I said, what happens with the children starting from birth. They're our future. And we can't keep ignoring it. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams.